Welcome back. We are holding in the middle of chapter Lamed Hey, the 35th chapter. For that matter, we began recently, a little bit in the class before this last class, and then namely in this past class, which the Alter Rebbe begins with an important question. So as much as we'll obviously try to recap the question at this time, because we are holding by the answer, yet to understand thoroughly the question, it's suggestible to go to the previous class, and additional to having access to all the previous classes, is one is a newcomer and they want to have some more thorough understanding of the Alter Rebbe's Tanya. It's always suggestible to go to this, or even on this very website, and in the link box Tanya, or on the TanyaOnline.com, also hosted by KosherTube. But yet it has it's a website that we mention time and again, understandably for those newcomers who want to tap into the previous classes. You have it in quite an organized way, namely with the text that one could easily follow. So as per last week's class, it would be suggestible, so one wants to understand the important fundamental question of the Alter Rebbe in the very beginning of chapter Lamed Hey, to adequately appreciate the answer that we were holding today. But in brief, we will recap the question, which the Alter Rebbe asks, that after I explained you what the avodah of the Beinoni, what the service of the Beinoni is, and more so eleo kolod mimshech, that we ought to draw ourselves precisely to the service of the Beinoni, not necessarily the tzaddik, but what is the Beinoni, or because the Beinoni has not yet transformed his animal soul, his Yetzer Hara, they are fully intact, which defines him as a Beinoni, which we could easily identify with who we really are, and that we do have a Yetzer Hara, we do have a Nefesh Bahamis. That Tzaddik doesn't have that. Obviously, the Rebbe points out himself that in Tzaddikim there's so many levels, but namely they made an important dent on the Nefesh Bahamis, and they're not inclined to meaning. That what does that mean? How does that translate? They're not inclined. They don't have this these average lusts, temptations, the things which are opposite, then or this which draws us towards the animalistic, towards the bodily, towards the animalistic, which, if we really examine ourselves right, we understand that we're more connected to the service of the Beinoni over the service of the Tzaddik. And as Dr. Rebbe himself, with the expression, even more than that, Dr. Rebbe in the, I believe it's chapter 27 or 28, Halavai the Beinoni. Halavai the Beinoni. Halavai would be the Beinoni, meaning that despite the Beinoni has all these temptations and has all these inclinations, bodily and animalistic inclinations, nonetheless it's able to arouse, elicit within itself that Siyur Odom, Odom meaning to say the focus of the Nefesh Elokis, the godly soul, implementing its precise mandate, or its mandate precisely the way it, with precision, for which it was created for, meaning making a Kadosh Baruch Hu dwelling place in this world via learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, and I say with precision, meaning to say not only doing the mitzvahs but doing them right, being scrupulous about them, about implementing every mitzvah which comes to one's hand, which is generally the mitzvahs which we ought to complete as Yidden, learning Torah, davening, Gemilas Chasadim, and understandably staying away from everything what Hashem says not to do. So that is the avodah of the Beinoni. And but yet he has a challenge. He has a Yetzer Hara, a tzaddik, especially the tzaddik v'toivles. It's called the tzaddik gomor. As we mentioned in tzaddikim itself, there can be thousands, 10,000, tens of thousands of levels, because you're dealing with people who transform the Nefesh Bahamis in the way they made a dent in the Nefesh Bahamis. Obviously there's so many different levels, but yet if we're really honest with ourselves, how could we, as long as we still have taivas, as long as we still have Shbahamis is intact, taivas to do things which are contrary to Ratzon Hashem, or even taivas heter, things which are permissible, but we have a taiva to indulge in the material, and we have to make decisions on a constant basis to override those taivas, override those temptations. That itself, and that itself shows that our nefesh b'hamis is fully intact. But yet we have to make those decisions. This is again Elel Kol Adam Yimshich. This is what we're here for in this world, to be a Shulchan Aruch Yid, to do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, and that is the Beinoni. The Beinoni never sins once, and again that is very special. Obviously, you want to categorize the Beinoni, deal with the lifestyle or the Aved of the Beinoni. It's extremely special, but in the same token, and then again, because someone who sins even once, he's no longer called a Beinoni, he's called a Rasha. As Al Rebbe brought from the Gemara, different Gemaras, the Rabbanon, even a rabbinic prohibition. Any violation makes a person a Rasha, even not only in action, speech, even in thought, when accepting a thought. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu writes clearly in the Torah, that precise expression is a violation which considers a Yid a Rosh, not a Beinoni. So we look at the Veit of the Beinoni, it is special, it is definitely great, grand, stupendous. It's something really to cherish. Yet, if you look at the Beinoni, that there's a dimension within him, or his whole makeup is similar to the average person, in the context that his Yetzer Hara is in full tact, again translating the fact that he has to hold himself back, not to do something which Hashem says not to do, or not to speak something Hashem says not to speak, or not even to think, which means he has to control his eyes, his ears, and what goes in his, which namely his thought, which is about his thought, to keep the pure thought. That itself he has to control is the biggest proof that his nefesh b'hamis is intact, and Yetzer Hara is in full tact. So these nisyonos, the challenges he has, is like anybody else. So so on one hand he's extremely special because he never did an aveda, he never will do an aveda. He's perfectly in line with what Hashem demands of a yid. Yet, on the other hand, there's a certain average. He's an average human being with all human temptations and inclinations. And that's why, remember, the Alter Rebbe explained that's why it says Kirosha. Not a Rasha, because he never violated, but Kirosha. He's the humanness within him is very average. The human gain, the human touch, which exists very very potently within his system, and is the humanness, the average human inclinations, temptations are fully intact. So that's why he's like on the verge, Kirasha, because Rahman al-San could go really and take it shows him and demonstrates to him, or becomes enormous challenge for the Beinoni. But yet he's a Beinoni. So his Aveda is very special. But the Alter Rebbe asked, in the end of the day, it seems like it isn't fair, or it seems like it's purposeless that Hashem should take a neshama and put it in this world and says to be a Beinoni. Had the primary mandate be to be a tzaddik, and a tzaddik makes an important dent of his nefesh b'hamis, it makes an important dent of his Yetzer Hara, and is able, and again the quintessential tzaddik as an example, the paradigm tzaddik is able to completely transform his Yetzer Hara, as the Lashon and the Zayir maybe could become like a Yetzer Teiv, indicated in the Mishnah, based on the pasuk Yetzer Hara is completely transformed. The more so becomes an ally to the Nefesh Elikis. That makes sense. That's an accomplishment. You tell the Yid, you're coming down with him into this world of Nefesh Bahamis, you're coming down with the Yetzer Hara. Your mandate is to transform it. Your mandate is to make an important dent, or start with making an important dent, and eventually transform it, and eventually we can become an ally. That makes sense. That seems accomplished. That means fulfilling. But a person to be a Beinoni, to come down to this world to be a Beinoni. Well, it's special, the fact that he's on in this constantly on duty, in this milchama atzuma, in this intense war, and he's able to triumph over the nefesh bahamis on a constant basis. And again, as we mentioned, Yiddishkeit is not only expressed on a daily basis, an hourly basis, minute basis, it's in a second basis, in a millisecond, especially when it comes to thought and the subtle kochot. When it comes to vision, obviously you're dealing with milliseconds, which can make a difference. A person to be a Rasha or a Beinoni. So it is grand. His efforts are grand, but in the end of the day, what's the point? He remains. If he remains a Beinoni, as we mentioned, that a tzaddik is really up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Perikid Dal Rebbe says the person should try to tap in here and there, and that avodah of tehi tzaddik, but namely it's like avodas matona etenis kuhunaschem. It's like a kohen. HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides who's going to be a kohen. HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides if he's going to upgrade this yid to be that tzaddik of simchu bat tzaddikim b'Hashem, that his whole excitement, his whole joy, his whole passion is in Yiddishkeit, and he has no other passions, no other temptations. That is something when HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides to upgrade the yid from the level of Beinoni to the level of tzaddik. Well, the Rebbe says it could be a person who would live his life, all his life, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides, I don't want him to be a tzaddik. And we know it. The fact that we could walk out in the street and we know we have certain temptations, we know we're not a tzaddik just because of the temptation. Now, again, we mentioned the signal can come, but the Beinoni controls the signal, should not enter, not in action, not into his speech, not into his action, not into his speech, not even to his thought. Dechei b'shtei yadai, pushes away with both hands. Because the moment he accepts even his thought, he's called a Rasha, not a Beinoni anymore. So we know we're not tzaddikim. And Alter Rebbe even writes in the Neighbors that they could decide a person could live Beinoni kol yom, leaves kol yom m'chamazu. So from all his days in this very war, in this very battle, overcoming these very challenges, same challenges when he's 60, like when he's 16. Can be, and most of the people are like that. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a tremendous hana, obviously, from this constant effort. Understandably so. He is placed in Elam Hazah with a full setup of animalistic desires and temptations, and he's able to stand on guard 24 hours a day throughout his whole life. It's great. It's grand. If you're marking efforts, but if you're thinking about accomplishments, this seems like a waste of time. I've never had the ability to for example, a teacher teaching a child, and he has a master, or rather a professor, a teacher, he comes into a class and he expects at the end of the year should be different than the beginning of the year, because he's able to evoke within his students, within his pupils, this, not only to give them the information, but the information that they learn would evoke with them their passion towards the subject which he's teaching them, and then eventually they appreciate it to such a degree that many of them become teachers, which means their whole life is about this particular subject which they're learning. That means it's not only you fed certain information, but you've made a transformation in this pupil, in this student, that he came in without any knowledge, and now not only he absorbed some knowledge, or a lot of knowledge, he becomes one, he becomes excited, and lives with this concept that he's learning, maybe medicine or whatever he's learning. Eventually he becomes a professor, a teacher, a doctor, and so on. Which means you transform, and everything we do in life we try to accomplish, not only to gain credit for the efforts, but actually accomplish, to set up a business, or to set up have an effect in society. You want to have a dent, you want to make an important impact. And apparently, when you think about the life of the Beinoni, or the mandate of the Beinoni, yes, there is effort, yes, there's credit for the effort, but it doesn't seem like there's any accomplishment, because he remains with the same Yetzer Hara and the same challenges again when he's 60, like he's 16. Where's the accomplishment? That's basically the Alter Rebbe's question. Again, he adds another few points over here to enrich his question, which again, I could suggest you to go to last week's class on the TanyaOnline.com website, or any way you want to see it, and you'll be able to understand and again appreciate the question namely in order to appreciate the answer. So the Alter Rebbe continues, and we started this actually, V'hu Behegdim, which is just about a fifth, or even less, about a sixth within the chapter. V'hu, you can see it in the corresponding English text. The V'hu Behegdim Lashon HaYinuko, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaMeshakeh Olim B'Dvarim. To point out, what Alter Rebbe is basically telling us, he's going to explain us over here, that in the end of the day, the Beinoni, with his performance of mitzvahs, with his learning Torah, which is actually that is his mandate. To be a Beinoni is not only to control himself, chas v'shalom, not to violate any Aveda, but he's involved in the end of the day of learning Torah. If you look at his schedule, he's a Yid, gets up every morning, davens like a Yid, learns Torah like a Yid on a daily basis, which is the obligation of a Yid. Essentially, the obligation of a Yid is to learn Torah every moment, but as it's established based on people's schedules, Perek Echad Shachris, Perek Echad Arvis, he's very careful to learn his Torah, his Shiurim, his Blat Gemara, his Halacha, and so on and so forth. He learns every day Torah. He puts on tefillin every day. He puts on a talis every day. He has a kosher mezuzah, beautiful mezuzahs. He reads the Megillah. He listens to the Kriyas HaTorah. He does mitzvahs. He does gemilas chasadim. He puts on tefillin. Shakes a lulav and esrei. So the Alter Rebbe is going to focus over here, and he says that there's something very grand about the Yid who does all that, and to the extent that it's worth to come down to this world in order to engage in his learning Torah and his doing mitzvahs, which that itself, as the Alter Rebbe is going to explain, that itself is a great accomplishment. Which means, if you're looking not only for effort, for accomplishment, we're going to see how this is the actual Shmiras HaTorah of mitzvahs, guarding Torah, doing its mitzvahs, learning Torah, doing its mitzvahs, is enormous accomplishment. And in this context, that it's worthwhile for the neshama to come down into this world again. When we say accomplishment, in the context that the Yid truly connects to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, truly, genuinely connects to HaKadosh Baruch Hu via learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, which he was never able to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu prior to that, despite he's a godly neshama sitting in Gan Eden within a total godly environment, yet he's not really connected to God. And from his perspective even from his perspective of his neshama, and for this, again, as we just mentioned, it's worthwhile for the neshama to come down to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, because that's the way it's truly connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Meaning to say that from the perspective of the neshama on its own, as despite we said neshama is a chelik l'kamimal, it's part of God, which, as we asked the question as well, if it's part of God, in the context of in the questions of the Alter Rebbe in this past week's class, or the week before, the end of the class week before, which we took time to elaborate on this beginning of chapter 35, from the perspective, despite we say that from the perspective of the neshama is a godly soul, a chelik l'kamimal, it's part of God, which perhaps one may ask, what in the world does it need to learn Torah in order to connect to God? Because there's God in Torah. Torah is God. Anoichi. Hashem says, I placed myself in Torah, every part of Torah, maybe a Blat Gemara, a Halacha, a Chelik in Tanya, or any Sefer Kodesh that you learn. Or, as we said, mitzvahs are ivarim, the malka mitzvahs are the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hence, when I do a mitzvah, I connect, I embrace HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why do I need to do mitzvahs? Why do I have to learn Torah? Isn't my neshama a chelik l'kamimal? Isn't my neshama a part of God? So I'm already connected to God. Why do I need to learn Torah and do mitzvahs? And yet, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes that neshama, which is pure and divine, from a place which is as well an environment of purity and a spirit of a total spirit of divinity, which is Gan Eden, and brings the neshama precisely down here into this world. For what? In order to learn Torah and do mitzvahs ba'olam hazeh, in this physical world, and telling the neshama that you being a chelik elokah, being a part of God, is still not that ultimate connection to God, And the way you really want to connect to me is through learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. And that's called that, and that is an accomplishment. From a neshama which is not, a yid which is not connected to God, despite him having a neshama, or even as he lives in this physical world, but prior to his learning Torah, opening the Gemara, learning a Blad Gemara, or the learning the Gemara, or prior to opening the Sefer, or prior to doing the mitzvah, the tefillin, the mezuzah, the lulav and esrog, or any other mitzvah of the 613 mitzvahs, he has godliness within him, but he's not fully, absolutely connected to God. He's not connected to God in absolute manner. It is precisely when he opens the Gemara and learns the Torah, or does the mitzvah, only then is he connected to God. And when we think about it, that is not just an accomplishment, that is an enormous accomplishment, being not connected or adequately connected. The click, the connection is not there. To having that perfect connection, that click with your Creator, that is an enormous accomplishment. So what's with the Yetzer Hara? Is it nudging? Is it bothering? Is it disturbing? Is it challenging? Is it being this constant obstacle? Yes. And from that perspective, it doesn't seem fair and it doesn't seem right, or namely in the context of accomplishment, we don't see we're accomplishing as much, or we're accomplishing in the context of making a dent in the animal soul. Correct, true. But the accomplishment in the end of the day, because of our Vedas, through learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, Balaam has in this physical world, and Al Tereb is going to prove you and show you how we come from a state of disconnect to a great extent, even though we do have sparks of godliness, and more so we're a part of the chelik, the neshama is a part of God, yet there's missing that connection, missing that click, that total unity with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to an expression of total unity with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is enormous accomplishment, and more than an accomplishment, as one can understand. It's not just an accomplishment, that is really it. From a non-connecting connection to God to yes connection to God, that's a quantum leap step, or more so a quantum leap type of connection. And that's why we should be calm, and we could console ourselves with the Lashon Al Rebbe. We could be. This will be a lashon again of the Alter Rebbe, the expression of the Alter Rebbe. It's a comfort, it's a consolation, and it's a consolation in a way. It's like a double consolation, and the consolation leaves no room for a state of melancholy. It leaves no room for a state of downness. It leaves only room for the Yid. It leaves the message to be vibrant and to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with simcha, with joy, with passion, with elation, gladness of heart, because we're able to truly connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Dafka, through learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, even over again, the fact that I have a godly neshama, the connection is there precisely when I learn Torah and do mitzvahs, even overlooking the fact that prior to that I have a neshama. So again, it needs explanation, and this is what Dr. Rebbe is going to come explain in chapter 35 of So Who obviously needs explanation. Why should it be that way? And if I have a neshama already connected, do I need to learn Torah and doing mitzvahs? So this is what Dr. Rebbe is going to explain, and he brings from the Lashon HaYinukah, V'hu behegdim. And this is by prefacing Lashon HaYinukah. The Lashon of the Yinukah, as we mentioned, he was a child which had great insights, famously in the time of the Zohar, in the time of the Tanoim, when there was the compilation of the Zayah. There was this little child, and it says a number of places, how is it that this little child was able to perceive so much of Torah, or he knew so much of Torah, was way beyond this which he was taught as a child in Cheder by his teachers. He was and he himself became part. He's quoted in the Zohar, meaning to say not only the revealed part of Torah, but he had enormous insight into the esoteric part of Torah, which we have to understand. Again, it's a history in its own. But he wrote in Zayir, this is quoted in Parshas Balak, and Al Rebbe quotes this Yinukah, this child, and this becomes a fundamental in the reason why the neshama came down, and in fundamental an explanation becomes the basis, becomes the foundation of the explanation of the Alter Rebbe here in this chapter, and subsequently as well in Tanya, of the importance of why the neshama coming down into this world. In other words, the learning Torah and doing mitzvahs over the way the neshama is already a part of God, apparently, and especially it's experiencing Gan Eden and so on and so forth, which is in an ambiance, in a spirit of total sanctity, divinity, purity, etc. So the Alter Rebbe here is the Lashon Hazayah. So it's obviously an Aramaic, but we'll do our best in translating it. Al pasuk HaChacham Bereishei. That the Chacham, the Nuka says, his eyes, the Lashon in the pasuk, in Tanakh, HaChacham Eina Bereishei, that his eyes are in his head. So comes from Shlomo Melech, obviously, right? We have this a few times. It's brought in different. It's commonly we see this pasuk commonly used. HaChacham Eina Bereishei, that the wise has his eyes in his head, and usually it's in the context that he's able to foresee when he comes to a scenario. He's able to see a little bit distant. He has his eyes in his head. He's able to look ahead over what is going on now. He makes a decision now based on the bigger picture. That's a chacham. He's wise. Eina Bereishei, his eyes are in his head, meaning to say that he's able to look at the broader perspective and make his decision accordingly. Or it's a simple translation of this pasuk. Other translations also, which again deal with which are really interconnected. That you're dealing with the chacham looks at things differently. This is Shlomo Melech says, and this is the simple meaning. So the Zayar, the Yenuka goes on and takes this pasuk and translates it as follows. He says, where else are the eyes of man? In other words, Hashem created the human being that his eyes are in his head. So he says, Ella krahachihu vaday. That the pasuk is certainly telling us the following. The Tanan, as we learned, leyahach barnash. Lost the place here. Okay, leyahach barnash bigilui dereisha arba amis. That man should not go with gilui dereisha, which means without a covering on his head, known to us as the yarmulke, which is a combination of Yoreh Elikim, a God-fearing person wears a yarmulke, but namely in halacha that a person should not walk 4 cubits without a head covering, without a yarmulke, without a head covering. My time, what is the reason? Just a note over here, obviously people try to have the yarmulke all the time. Generally it's Yoreh Elikim. It's the point that things don't begin with me. There's something always over me. That's the real simple reason of yarmulke, which is called Yoreh Elikim, or other types of abbreviations, which is in the word yarmulke, or a kippah, which kippah also means a covering. So I just want to point out that people try to have the yarmulke all the time, but the real, the halacha when it comes to wearing a yarmulke is not to walk 4 cubits without a yarmulke. So he brings that le'ye barnash begilu dereisha arba amis, one which should not walk 4 cubits with a gilui dereisha, which means without a covering over his head, that his head to be completely exposed. My time, but what is the reason? The Yenuka continues. Because the Shechinta shari al reisha, because the Shechinta dwells over your head. And v'chol chacham inui umili bereisha inun bahi desharye v'kaim al reisha. And this is what Shlomo Melech tells us, every chacham, his eyes is in his head, meaning to say that his eyes are focused on this which is on his head. Ha-chacham, einov, his focus is einov umilui. His focus is on this which is on his head, which is the Shekhinah. That is the way he teaches the pasuk. Again, ha-chacham, einov, his eyes are bereisha. He's focusing on this which is on his head, which is the Shekhinah. Ba'ahu the shari v'kaim al reisha, for this is the one who dwells and exists upon his head, which again he said the Shekhinah v'kad inun tamon. When his eyes are focused on this which dwells on his head, which is the Shekhinah, leinda For him to know that who the neheda, he ought to know that who neheda dadlik al reisha, itzrich lemashcha, that this divine presence which is dwelling upon your head, you need to oil it. Begin the gufa de barnash iupsilo, because the body of man is the wick, uneheda adlik le'elo, and there's the fire again, which is the Shekhinah divine presence, is lit, is burning upon the wick, which means upon the person, upon the head of the person. Hence, meaning, in other words, that the Shekhinah is Sharia, is dwelling upon the person like a flame which sits and burns upon the wick, and the man is compared to a wick, and the Shekhinah is that fire burning on the wick, which again, the Shekhinah, the Eir Hashem, the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the divine presence. V'shalma Shleima Malkat Tzavach V'Omar, and Shleima, the king, screams and said, which means is determined with his message, and says and relates, V'shemen al reishcha al yechsar, oil upon your head shall not be missing. The Hanaheda de Bereshe, Itzrich Lemishche, for the light, the fire, the godly fire, the godly presence, the divine presence, because we compare it to a fire. And again, the body, the wick, so it needs to be oiled. When you look at a wick, you could light it, it'll burn for a few seconds, it'll be a nice little fire. But if you don't oil the wick, or if you don't put the wick in oil, if you think about it like the Hanukkah menorah or any other little wick which we try to burn, and we put it into a little cup, and in the cup we put oil in order that the fire should not extinguish. Then the fire should be able to continuously burn. In other words, even if you light it, for a moment you'll see the fire on the wick, but if you don't oil the wick, the fire will inevitably extinguish. So you need to oil this wick in order that the flame should maintain itself, should remain on the wick on a constant basis. And this is what the Shlomo Melech is screaming. He says that Shemen al Reish Chal Yechser, you should never have any lack, and you should be never lacking any oil. As he goes on, that again, the Naheda the Bereisha Yitzrich Lemashcha, the light upon one's head, he has to oil it, Ve'inun, he has to oil it. And what happens when you oil the wick, and together with putting the wick in a little container of oil, in order that there should be the perpetuation or the continuation of the fire should continue to burn. But what happens after a while? The oil is consumed via the wick. The oil is consumed into the flame. So what do? It's not a question. It's not a shaila. You add more oil, and when that oil finishes, when that oil is consumed into the fire, you add more oil. As long as you want that fire to burn, you gotta just continue to pump oil, continue to place oil. And if you want it to, and if you do so, it could burn not only for a day, not only for a year, it could burn for eternity, as long as you continue to place more and more oil. And this is what the Yanuk is telling us, that Shlomo Melech is telling, the message of Shlomo Melech is, V'shemen al reish chal yechsar, make sure, because the Shekhinah is there upon you, you become a wick to the Shekhinah, the divine presence dwells upon you. You make sure that there is a constant flow of oil, in order the Shekhinah should not chas v'shalom leave you, in order the Shekhinah should be able to burn on a constant basis on you, within you, and namely al reishcha. Again, just like we have the wick, is the fire burns on top of the wick, and that's why he uses the reishcha, v'shemen al reishcha al yechsar. There shouldn't be missing any oil within the system, within the yid, in order that the godly presence, which is the neir, which is the fire, the divine presence, which is the fire, should not only come in as a spark in and out, but v'shemen al reishcha el yechsar, you make sure there's enough oil that the Shekhinah should be there and remain there on a constant basis. Now, what is the oil? We know what the wick is, the body. We know what the Shekhinah is. I mean, as much as we know, the Shekhinah is fire. Hashem elikecha eish eichlahu. Hashem is fire. And actually, if you want to even look into the pattern, eish eichla, it's a consuming fire. A fire which consumes. like the fire which we have down here in this world. When we think about physical fire, the fire consumes. If you place enough oil, it is able to consume nicely the oil and maintain and burn because it's consuming oil. And the same thing when we're dealing with the Shekhinah, Eish, Hashem Elokecha Eish, Eichu, Hashem is fire, and the Hashem is on our Hashem, the divine Shekhinah is on our head, and we continue kind of the host of Shekhinah, meaning to say that the Shekhinah remains. It wants to stay, not only come in and out, but the Shekhinah is adamant to stay with us on a constant basis. So therefore, if you want, just like you want the fire to stay on the wick on a constant basis, you have to continue oiling that wick. So too, the message over here is that we have to continue oiling that wick. But what is the oil? So he goes on, the Yenuka goes on, V'inun uvdun tovon. This is the good deeds, the mitzvahs which we do. The limud ha-Torah, the kiyum mitzvahs, learning Torah and doing the mitzvahs, that's the oil. And that is what keeps the Shekhinah down here and keeps the Shekhinah burning within us, again, within every single Yid, man, women, and child. And as he concludes, this is what the pasuk is saying, that if you're a chacham, you continue to focus on who's sitting on your head. Continue to focus to make sure that that divine presence, which is determined to stay with you, determined to burn on you, you make sure that he's able to burn nicely. Your wick is good. Your body, me as a wick, is a nice wick in order to host or make sure to make, in order to have that fiery, or to have the Shekhinah, in other words, in order to have the divine presence burn nicely over you. But as we know that it's not enough, just like we have the wick and the fire, apparently we have a wick and a fire. Why shouldn't the fire just be there? But we know it doesn't work that way. In order the fire should be in the wick on a constant basis, you need to oil the wick on a constant basis. Shlomo Melech says, a chacham, if you're a chacham, einov, have your eyes focused on the Reishi and that Shekhinah who wants to stay there, not come visit you periodically. He wants to be there on a constant basis. And if he wants to be there on a constant basis and you're focused on that Reishi and that Shekhinah, the Shali HaReisha, you oil it on a constant basis. What is the oil? Learning Torah, doing mitzvahs. Ad kan l'shenei, till this is the Lashon, this is the end quote of this Yenuka. So we're getting a little bit of the understanding. Again, it's a bit cryptic. It's not the Vart is beautiful. It's clear, actually very clear. But let's try to understand what the Yenuka is saying. You understand the Yenuka is saying, and again, which would ultimately answer the question why the neshama came down into this world, and what is the accomplishment of the neshama coming down to this world. So Hine, Beth Rebbe continues, Bir Mashal Zeh, explaining this Mashal Shehim Shaleira Shechina Leira Neir, and that the Yenuka equates in his parable the light of the Shekhinah to the light of a fire. It doesn't shine, it doesn't hold itself onto the wick. Without oil, and the Yenuka says similarly, and the Shekhinah relates this message that the Shekhinah tells us, rather, the Shekhinah Shedem al Gufa Eina Shekhinah Shed al Gufa Adam Shinim Shel Psila. That the divine presence does not dwell on the body of man, which is the wick, only through good deeds, and precisely through good deeds. And we say precisely through good deeds because, again, based on the way we asked the question, and the Alter Rebbe asked the question in the previous class, or points it as we asked the question what the Alter Rebbe was getting at, rather, what Alter Rebbe was getting in the previous class, we pointed out what the Alter Rebbe was getting at as well within the question, that apparently why is the Maisim Tevim, the doing mitzvahs, and the learning Torah, the oil which would maintain the Shekhinah, which would keep the Shekhinah on a constant basis with us? Don't we have a neshama, which the neshama itself, being that it's a godly neshama, that why shouldn't that be the oil in order to keep the Shekhinah with us? What is the importance of Torah mitzvahs? And again, the whole reason why Torah and mitzvahs are considered oil which maintain the Shekhinah, because just like oil begashmius, it's not just stama liquid. It's a certain substance which is similar. It has within itself that ability. It has that the substance of the oil is a unique substance which is close to the notion of fire. It gets extremely hot, as we know. Again, the uniqueness which exists within oil over any other liquid, and therefore, because its relation to fire, therefore it's able to maintain the fire. So to Teda mitzvahs, the reason why Teda mitzvahs are called Shem and are called oil, because it has the lukus, it has the godliness within it. And as we mentioned, Teda is Anechi Hashem Lekecha, Teda is godly, and so to every mitzvah, Eivarim, the Malka, the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And because they're connected to the fire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, therefore they are precisely the oil which maintains the Shekhinah, because they have this godliness within them. So the question is my neshama godly neshama? And as the pasuk says, Chelik lekami mal ki chelik Hashem ami, that my godly neshama is also holy and is also the pure and is also divine. So why should my neshama be the oil which would maintain the Shekhinah al Reishi? Be the oil which would be able to create this beautiful flame, and this flame which would continue to burn. Why do I need the Teda mitzvahs? So why does the Yenuka say, you continue oil, and the Yenuka concludes, V'inun uvdin tava, and it's the mitzvahs that we do, and it's not the neshama that we have. And the question is why? And in the words of the Alter Rebbe, V'leitaylu b'nishma, say it's not enough, which is neshama, which again would be similar to the substance of oil, which is related to fire, again similar to Teda mitzvahs. The Teda mitzvahs, Neid Hashem, Teda has it in itself, again, this the similar to the Shem, and it has that fire within it, or has that, it's conducive to maintain a flame, conducive to allow a fire to burn on a constant basis, because it's holy on its own, and it's not enough with the neshama. And again, apparently the neshama has the same type of substance, or the neshama is created, is the makeup of the neshama is extremely apparently similar to Teda, because it's chelik lekami mal apparently. But he says no, it's not enough as a neshama that it's a chelik lekami mal. Liz hu kishem elipsila, that the neshama should be like oil to the wick, like oil to the wick. It's not enough. He says the oil to the wick is precisely maisim tevin. So why so? Rabbi explains, this is explained, it's understood to every thinker, to every understander, to everyone who intellectualizes and understand what Teda mitzvahs is, and precisely that would tell him that Teda mitzvahs is precisely Teda mitzvahs the oil, not the neshama on its own, despite neshama being a chelik of the kamimal, a part of God. And what's the explanation? Because the answer is like this. The Rabbi explains here. We'll have to probably continue the coming week. But let's try to tap in a little bit to the explanation of the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe explains over here something very beautiful. And he says it's mevur or muvon. It's explained and it's understood. It means if you think a bit deeper to what a mitzvah is all about, we understand that this virtue exists in mitzvah and doesn't even exist in a neshama, which is a part of God, which is a chelik lekami mal. Because ultimately what Alter Rebbe is saying is that when you say something is godly, or when you say something is a part of God, it has to be completely selfless. It has to be completely about God and not about anything else other than God. Meaning to say, just like we find, for example, in the very larger picture, that the Kodesh Baruch Hu, say a larger picture, more of a broader spectrum, about a broader understanding of this, or when you look at the two dimensions, sometimes with a more extreme, you could understand them, and when you bring them close and you have to understand them in a subtle, a sensitive, subtle level, you could appreciate them because you understand them more of on a broader, or more of a when you're dealing on an extreme levels. I say extreme levels, which again would allow us to understand this explanation of the Alter Rebbe, why precisely Teda mitzvah over the neshama. Which then it's obviously more. This is subtle differences, but the differences yet are very great, and the difference is enormous because from the way we'll understand it, On the extreme, we'll be able to, on extreme levels, we'll understand that even when it is the explanation is subtle, but yet we'll understand the point, which would equate the two, which means the difference, the way it's in a very extreme, clear, stark manner. We'll understand that it's the same when you're dealing, even when things are, the difference seem to be on the surface subtle. The way I say this is, we'll look at the Gemara. The Gemara says in the Masechta Seita that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that when it comes to somebody who is haughty, egoistic, somebody who is a Bal Gaiva, meaning to say that he's a show-off, or show-off is more the way he expresses his Gaiva, but meaning to say that he somebody who is a big ego. Hashem says Bal Gaiva, which means that somebody is haughty. Hashem says I can't be in the same domain. What it means, it can't be the same domain, because the Kodesh Baruch Hu says it's or about me or about you. If it's about me, it's about me, and if it's about you, it's about you. I'm not there. That's a simple meaning, which means and again, there's a whole that's the Seit, I believe it's Daf Hey, a whole blat, an whole amid. In Gemara, it's a big amid which deals with this notion of gaiva, chasing away HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Gaiva, haughtiness, self-recognition is the key element, or the key expression which distance HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem says, not only in that, don't feel comfortable, I can't be in that domain. Meaning to say, it's or you, it's no, or me. And we mentioned a number of times in conjunction with that Gemara, the famous Vart of the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov says, he touches the pasuk so beautifully, which literally means, could a man hide in his hiding place and I won't see him? No, Hashem says Hashem. And obviously Hashem is everywhere. Again, it is a pasuk which says that we can never escape, we can never hide from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the Baal Shem Tov teaches, namely towards the end of the pasuk, he says, it's about me. And Hashem says, I can't see him, I'm not there. But he says, if you put the pause after loy, that it's not about me, then Hashem says, I come straight in. I see him, I project, I focus straight in and become part of him. If it's va'ani, I'm not there. Can't see him. I'm disgusted to a certain extent. I can't be in that domain. If it's about you, can't be. But if it's not about me, Hashem says, I see you. In other words, and then here we're obviously not dealing with somebody who was mafkid, and mafkid is he lives a life of ifkedus. God said, God, you tell me to put on film, I'm not going to do so, which is obviously an expression of gaiva to some degree, because I don't want to submit myself to the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because I'm so into myself. I'm not going to do that for you, God. That is obviously an expression of gaiva. That I'm not there to subordinate myself to the word of my master. That's obviously gaiva. But we're not dealing even with that type of gaiva, where the Gemara is really dealing with somebody who is ashamed of Torah mitzvahs, learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. But it's all about me. Look at me, focus on me. I said, and there you shame me, there you don't wait for me. This is something which Hashem says, it's about you, I'm not there. Simple, plain blank. Look in the Gemara, you see it's dealing dafka, the indication that's dealing someone was ashamed of Torah mitzvahs. Because in the end of the day, if it's God, it's only about God. That is a simple meaning of the Gemara. And if it's you, it's only about you, not about me. It says Hashem. So now we understand again the extreme. It's about me gaiva, for example, clear-cut haughtiness, or conversing the clear-cut Shekhinah. We can understand it, bring it together, even when we're dealing on subtle levels. And again, we will continue, but just try to conclude this message over here to understand how it fits in, why the neshama itself is not considered oil and is precise to Torah mitzvahs, because the neshama, it's a part of God, and because it's a part of God, it loves God, it fears God, but in the end of the day, it's yesh mishayev. The neshama I fear God. I love God, especially when it comes to love. Think about love. When I love something, it's all about my expression. And if because I have a neshama by its innate nature, it has ava v'yira to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the expression of the neshama, obviously meaning to say if it was never told Torah mitzvahs, it wouldn't be inclined to do Torah mitzvahs per se if it was never part of its mandate, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would never give us a Torah. The neshama on its own, because it's part of God, it loves God. It means the primary expression of the neshama, it's fear of God. Again, reverence. We're talking about fear in the context like reverence of God, and it has love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yet obviously, Hashem gives us a Torah. The neshama is inclined to do Torah and to do mitzvahs. But a neshama on its own, how does it express its chelik of the kamimal mamashnis? How does it express it being a part of God? Because it's a part of God, so it loves God. It's like a malach, like we say in davening. It has yira, and it has ava, like we say in Birchas Kishma, and ava, the neshamas have ava and yira. The malachim have love and fear to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because this is part and parcel of them, because they're so holy, they're so divine. Obviously, they love God and they fear God. And even more so than neshama, which in neshama even stands higher and deeper within than a malach. So it has ava v'yira. But with ava v'yira itself, you don't connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because if you look at it subtly, again based on this explanation of the Gemara, if you look at the neshama, the expression of the neshama in the expression of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu via its fear, via its love, to a great extent, it's about it expressing its fear, namely when it comes its love. I love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So even your love is not chas v'shalom to anything which is alien from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or namely something which is not aligned or opposite what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. But again, that the neshama has never a problem with. It's only the animal soul, the Yetzer Hara, can love, develop an inclination, and drive a desire to things which are contrary to Ratzon Hashem. The neshama doesn't have that problem. The neshama's love is solely a love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but ultimately, in the end of the day, it's I love you, Hashem. In this case, subtly, it's a total expression of I. And if it's a total expression of I, it is not God. As opposed, conversely, when you're dealing with mitzvahs, the whole makeup of the mitzvah is not about me. It's Ratzon Hashem. It's the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a pure Ratzon, and Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem says, put on tefillin. That is Pnimis Ritzoni. That is the Pnimis of the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when I take that tefillin and put it on my hand and put it on my head, at that point and only at that point I connect to you, Hashem, because that is solely you. That's not me, and it's not even my godly expression. It's not expression of my love and my fear and so on. It could be as a result of my loving you, therefore I will do that mitzvah, but the action of the mitzvah itself has nothing to do with me and only about you. Once it's only about you, that's the way I connect to you, Hashem, as opposed to when it's about me. Even my me is loving Hashem, because subtly it's me, it's not about you. Doing a mitzvah is you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God willing, we'll look for, and that's the way I connect, with an absolute connection to you. And for this, the only thing which could remain oil, to oil the body, the psila, the wick, in order that the Shekhinah should be sharia al should dwell on the person on a constant basis, is precisely learning Torah and precisely doing mitzvahs, even more than the neshama, which on its own is the chelik of kamimal. As we will, God willing, continue in this the way in the Bezos Hashem in the next week's class, the way the Alter Rebbe so beautifully puts it into these beautiful words. But again, this is the explanation. This is the core of the explanation. Obviously, with the Alter, with the learning the text, we'll be able to understand it clearer, better, and more profound manner. Yet this is the gist of the explanation. Be'ez Hashem, we look forward to continue. Have a wonderful evening.